Picture this. A Japanese mother is watching her 1-year-old struggle. He falls, he cries, he looks up at her, waiting, and she just doesn't move. Now, to a lot of us, this might immediately look like neglect, but as we're going to see, it's actually one of the absolute most powerful gifts she can give his developing brain. So let's dive right into this. You really have to wonder, why does Japan consistently have some of the highest average IQs in the world? And we're not just talking about a lucky year or two, but for decades, literally across millions of children. The answer actually isn't their genetics. It's not their school system either. The real answer starts much, much earlier than that. We're talking in the crib, in the kitchen, and in the bath.
Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Today, we're unpacking 4 totally counterintuitive, fiercely science-backed habits that shape the infant brain in Japan. Just a quick heads up before we really get into it, some of what you're about to hear is probably going to sound pretty extreme if you're used to Western parenting norms. We aren't here to say one way is absolutely better than another. Instead, we're going to look closely at the science actually says about these cultural practices so you can decide what makes sense for your own family. We're going to count down these 4 habits together. Habit 4 is skinship. Habit 3 is real food. Habit 2 is normal talking. And habit 1 is real responsibility. Let's kick things off with habit 4, skinship for emotional regulation.
Okay, so in Japan, there's this really beautiful concept called skinship. It's a word that doesn't perfectly translate into English, but it basically means profound physical closeness through skin-to-skin contact. And we aren't just talking about giving your kid an occasional hug. Mothers and babies in Japan actually bathe together every single night. They co-sleep constantly, often until the child is 6 or 7 years old. And for the first couple years of life, babies are primarily carried everywhere rather than being pushed around in strollers, which honestly definitely saves a lot of trunk space.
Now, the contrast here is absolutely wild. In the West, standard parenting advice is constantly warning us that co-sleeping creates dependency, right? Or that carrying a baby too much is just going to spoil them. We are drilled to foster independence as early as humanly possible. But the Japanese view totally embraces this ancient intimacy to build actual biological regulation. And what's so fascinating to me is that Japan is quite literally one of the most modern, high-tech countries on Earth. I mean, this is the land of bullet trains and robotics. Yet, in the most intimate corner of life, they never abandon the ancient way. It goes to show that being modern doesn't have to mean being cold. And you know what? The research actually completely backs this up. A huge study published in Developmental Psychology found that infants who experienced consistent physical closeness in their first year showed measurable changes at the molecular level, like literally changing the genes that control their stress response. On top of that, researchers from Notre Dame University linked this early skin contact to way stronger emotional regulation and significantly better cognitive performance years down the road. This physical closeness is physically rewiring the baby's biological stress mechanisms. Moving right along to habit 3, real food builds the brain. Think about typical weaning in a lot of Western homes. It usually starts with bland rice cereal, applesauce, maybe some sweet fruit purees. And look, there's nothing inherently wrong with those, but they are essentially just empty calories. Now contrast that with Japanese weaning. Starting around 5 or 6 months old, Japanese babies are getting savory miso broth, soft white fish, seaweed, steamed vegetables, and tofu. They are being given real, complex, savory food right out of the gate. So why does a bowl of miso matter biologically? Well, think about an infant's brain composition. It is roughly 60% fat. And a massive, massive portion of that fat needs to be DHA, which is a specific omega-3 fatty acid. Without DHA, the brain literally cannot build itself properly. It's like trying to build a brick house without any mortar. Because of those really early introductions to things like fish and seaweed, Japanese babies grow up with some of the highest dietary intakes of DHA in the entire world. To put some hard numbers to this, let's look at this incredible, long-running study from the University of Bristol called the ALPAC study. They tracked thousands of kids for years and discovered that mothers who consumed more seafood during pregnancy and early infancy had children with measurably higher verbal IQ, much better fine motor skills, and even stronger social development by the time they hit age 8. Introducing these complex, bitter, salty, and savory foods isn't just about structurally building the brain, it fundamentally shapes the entire relationship that child is going to have with food for the rest of their life. Next up is habit 2, normal talking expands vocabulary. This one is based on a Japanese concept called katarikake ikuji, which basically translates to narrating childcare. Right from the day a baby is born, Japanese mothers tend to speak to them in full, totally normal sentences.
They explain what they're doing while folding laundry, they describe the weather outside, they narrate dinner being made. If you're an outsider, it probably looks a little strange, right? It's like a one-way conversation with a newborn who obviously can't say a word back. But they treat the baby as if they are already listening, because, well, they actually are.
Now, let's make a really important distinction here. In the West, you constantly hear that high-pitched, exaggerated tone. You know the one. Does the little baby want the bot? Yes, he does. Well, science actually shows that the melodic, warm tone, what researchers call parentese, is totally fine and actually helps language development. The problem is the dumbed-down baby talk that simplifies words and treats the baby like they're incapable of understanding. The Japanese approach skips that simplification completely. They keep all the warmth of parentese, but they drop the dumbing down. They just use real, complex words. And if you're wondering why this is so absolutely critical, just think about this number, 30 million. In what is probably one of the most famous child development studies ever done, researchers Betty Hart and Todd Risley discovered that the number of words a child hears before age 3 is one of the single strongest predictors of their academic success years later. By kindergarten, some kids had heard 30 million more words than others. 30 million? Literally just by talking to your child normally and narrating your day, you are completely closing that gap before they even step foot inside a school. And finally, habit 1, real responsibility predicts success. Honestly, this is the habit that completely blows Western parents' minds. From the very moment a Japanese child can walk, they are handed real, tangible tasks. It is incredibly common for a 2-year-old in Japan to pour their own water, help carry groceries, or be fully responsible for putting their own shoes away. And yeah, half the water might end up spilling all over the floor, but that is totally part of the process. This is so deeply culturally ingrained that there's even a famous national TV show called Hajime no Tsukai, which means My First Errand. It's been on the air since 1991. The cameras secretly followed toddlers, some of them like 2.5 years old, as they walk down real city streets, navigating real traffic and real stores all by themselves, just to buy something for their mom. To us, it sounds absolutely shocking. To them, it's just tradition. And again, the science confirms exactly why this works so well. Marty Rossman, a brilliant researcher over at the University of Minnesota, tracked kids for over 25 years, all the way into adulthood. What she found was staggering. The single best predictor of adult success, literally a better predictor than their IQ, better than their family's income, better than how educated their parents were, was whether the child had been given household responsibilities starting between ages 3 and 4. 3 and 4. Think about that. In a lot of Western cultures, we're still actively spoon-feeding kids at that age.
There is such a deep core cultural divide here when it comes to the idea of struggle. The Western assumption delays responsibility. We see a toddler struggling to zip a coat, and we immediately think, oh, he's only 2, let me just do it for him. We want to fix the struggle because, let's be real, watching a small child struggle for 10 minutes with something we could do in 5 seconds feels incredibly uncomfortable. But the Japanese assumption is the exact reverse. He's already 2, of course he can do it. They actively allow the struggle. Leaning into that discomfort rather than swooping in to rescue the child from it is exactly how the developing brain builds resilience, critical problem-solving skills, and a really deep sense of self-confidence.
When you zoom out and look at all 4 of these habits together, this really beautiful philosophy emerges. High IQ and lifelong success don't come from some rigid training method or baby flashcards or expensive tablet apps. The smartest babies in the world aren't being trained at all. They're being trusted. They're held incredibly close, they're fed real food, they're spoken to like actual human beings, and they're given the dignity of doing things completely on their own. It's just a profoundly different way of seeing your child.
The coolest part is, you can start any of these today with absolutely nothing more than the choice to just do it. So as we wrap up this explainer, I really want to leave you with a question to chew on. Which of these 4 Japanese habits, skinship, real food, normal talking, or real responsibility, challenges your own personal instincts the most? Really think about it and consider how just a simple little shift in your perspective might completely change the way a mind develops. Thanks so much for learning with me today.